Hey guys, my name's Chris. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking a bit about the misconception that noise and grain are the same thing in video and photos. We're also going to be talking a little bit about how you can just reduce noise overall. Make sure you're watching it in HD. I'm going to have some examples on the screen as we go along. Let's get started. Alright, so the short of it is, noise is a literal interference that comes from your electronic sensor. Film is a texture that comes from the days of actual analog film. People get these confused quite often because they both seem to have similar artifact type interference in your photo and video. The best example I can think of outside of photo and video is to sound. With sound, noise is a lot like the hiss you get from your speakers being too loud or the gain on your mic being too loud. Grain is a lot like that warm sound you get from records played on actual record players. It's the texture you get from the needle actually rubbing up against the record. Noise, like your mic gain being too high, degrades the quality of your audio. A lot like noise does to photo and video. Like I said, grain is a texture that comes from the individual stock of film. If you're an expert, you can actually pick out which stock is being used on the film just by taking a look at the photo or video. Depending on which stock it is, the grain can be large, small, frequent, dispersed, and so on. It actually comes from the chemicals that are being used in the film. If you actually hold up a piece of film before it's even used, you can see the grain patterns in it, and those show up in the media that is actually being made on the film. Grain is often added to digital media to give it a warmer, more nostalgic feel. A lot of the times it's added to photo and video, especially on digital cameras, to help liven it up, since oftentimes digital media has a tendency to be pretty flat. Noise is the signal interference that comes from your sensor in digital cameras. Noise comes in the way of random pixels being wrong when you zoom in. It does nothing but hurt your dynamic range, which is the amount of true colors you have to work with while editing. You can also get more noise from editing by raising your exposure or stretching your camera beyond its natural dynamic range. Higher noise amounts by raising your ISO can also give the appearance of a less sharp image. It kind of has a weird fuzzy feeling to it, kind of like if you turn the brightness up too much on your television. It does show up a bit more in constant colors, so if you have a really busy photo, the noise may not be as apparent as if you have like a bright LED light shining on your subject in constant red. Noise becomes more apparent the higher your ISO, and in parallel, the higher your ISO is, the faster shutter speed you can get, or the more closed aperture you get because your camera sensitivity is unnaturally higher. And with that, the higher camera sensitivity you have, the more signal interference you're going to have, and that's what the noise on higher ISO comes from. And in the world of digital, even at your lowest ISO, 100 on most cameras, you're still gonna get noise. I show this in my other video where I zoom in at 200% and you still see noise at ISO 100. So you can stack images on top of each other like I was doing in that video to reduce noise. So if you have two images at ISO 200, essentially your final outcome will be ISO 100 on your last image. Also, pretty much every photo, video editing software out there has some form of built-in noise reduction. Just don't overdo it or you'll get that weird oil painting feel from it. To reduce noise in your images and video, just make sure you have plenty of light to work with. That way you can keep your ISO as low as you can. My A7R II, it works best at ISO 100 when I'm shooting in RAW on photos. but in video it works a bit best at ISO 800 just because of the way video compression works on it. Sometimes to keep your ISO as low as you can get it, to reduce noise, you just have to open up your shutter more. You can do this by getting tripods, bipods, or even just setting it on the ground. Sometimes the best way of keeping noise to a minimum is just lowering your ISO and opening up your shutter a bit. Unfortunately, I know you can't do that on video all the time, but if you have the ability, just getting a bipod or a monopod or grips can really help open up your shutter speed while reducing camera shake. My A7R II can actually shoot below ISO 100 when shooting videos. It really doesn't do much when you're shooting RAW. All it's doing is editing in the camera. So while you're shooting RAW, just don't even worry about it. Just shoot at ISO 100 and reduce it in post. You typically get a more natural outcome. As I found out when shooting at like ISO 50, the highlights just get clipped out and I don't have as much to work with. Printing is when noise actually gets the most apparent. So I have no problem on my A7R II printing at like 20 inches up to ISO 6400. That's with a little bit of noise reduction in post. On my Sony a6000, I don't want to really print past ISO 800, as I kind of said earlier, it seems like it's a less sharp image and the colors aren't near as deep and rich. Sony has been making pretty crazy strides in the sensor game because you can now go up higher ISOs without really losing much dynamic range because of their new backlit sensors in all their new higher end cameras. Sorry, this kind of became a Sony ad for a second. You can tell it's all I've been about for the past 2 years. No, this isn't a paid endorsement by Sony. But it can be, Sony, if you're out there listening. Alright, so if you want to get that gritty feel from like urban photos, or that warm feel you get from film, do it in post. Don't raise your ISO just to get more noise into your image. All you're doing is hurting the dynamic range of your camera. You actually get better results if you add the noise later. Just get the best exposure you can in camera while you're shooting it, and then do all the crazy stuff while you're editing. I promise you'll thank me later. So if you enjoyed the video or you learned something, shoot me a thumbs up, or the next time you see somebody using the terms noise or grain wrong, send them this video. If you want to see more how-tos or tutorials related to photo and video, stop by my channel, subscribe, it's free, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for stopping by, guys. Take it easy.